when we were speaking with Gary a little while ago, he was telling us about a famous writers' meeting that took place in the early days of Big Finish. What are your memories of that meeting?
Well, my memories of that meeting was that it was in Gary Gillett's living room in his flat somewhere in southeast London. And I wonder what Gary said about it. Anyway, everyone who was interested in writing Doctor Who was there, including Stephen Moffat, who, you know, I only relatively recently discovered was is slightly younger than me. But, you know, I remember thinking at the time, who's brought their dad along? Because he had the demeanor of a much older man, you know, much more successful than the rest of us. You know what I mean? I felt we all still looked a bit like teenagers, whereas he looked, you know, like someone's dad, really, which I think he probably was. Not someone in the room, I hasten to add. This meeting was the moment when I realized that Doctor Who fandom is full of loads of different opinions, and not all of them particularly good about me. And it's awful to report it in a way, because it's going to involve Paul Cornell, who is a really nice human being. And he and I have sort of spoken about this and made our piece about it. So it's all fine. But if you're asking for the historical accuracy, when they announced that I was writing the first story, Paul Cornell said, it needs someone really special to write it. And frankly, darling, that ain't you, is what he said to me, which was devastating. And the whole room just froze, because it was so, I mean, but you see, it was from Paul's heart. And he thought, you should be getting Terence Dicks to write this, for goodness sake. I mean, who is Nick Briggs, for God's sake? And, you know, all valid points, I think. And I think it just, as happens with we Doctor Who fans, you know, the truth just of what we feel just comes up, and we go, oh no, I hated that episode. Oh, I love that episode. Oh, but this was, you know, we just get very impassioned. And that's what just bubbled up from him. I mean, I think he was also thinking, I would be better. Paul Cornell would be a better choice, you know, because he'd been massively successful with all the novels. And I wasn't part of that world. And so from his point of view, I was just some weird bloke from several fields away who just wandered in, and they say, and Nick Briggs is writing it. I think, what, you know,
how many audiovisual scripts had you written by that stage, though? Because you'd written a lot.
Approximately 15 million. I don't know. You know, it was.
I mean, a lot of them have become Big Finish scripts along the way. So I mean, there's a lot there that you. Yeah.
I've certainly drawn on that influence. So yeah, that is what happened there, and it was and also Stephen Moffat got up and walked out as well. In the middle of the meeting, he just got to walk through everyone. Oh, I'm not interested. It's just making such a huge statement.
That's because they hadn't got Paul McGann, is that right?
I think so. I think when we said that we're going to do it with Colin Sylvester and Peter, he just thought it was too retrospective. You know, he just thought, you've got to do a new thing. You've got to pick up whoever is the latest Doctor. And of course, we'd failed to do that. He just thought, I'm out, really. And I think he had bigger fish to fry. You know, you meet people at various points in their career. Like I remember, who was the chap who was in, Daleks in Manhattan, who went on to play Spider-Man?
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield. You see, there he was playing a fairly small part in a Doctor Who story. But he had an air about him that it's like he had a big sign on his head saying Hollywood this way. You know, you just knew it about him. And, you know, when he was stuck in a car going back from the set with Barnaby Edwards, Nick Pegg and myself, all completely being driven bonkers during the day, them being locked in a Dalek all day, not together, that would be strange. And just making up silly rhymes and things. And I just remember seeing Andrew kind of just gazing out of the window. And you could tell he was thinking, one day I won't have to put up with this. You know? and I think it was a bit like that with Stephen at that point. I mean, he had so much great stuff ahead of him, and was on the cusp of it all, and had achieved quite a lot already. You know, he was just, yes. It was nice that he came along. And he is a lovely man. I've spent many lovely hours with him since. But yeah, it is funny to look back on that. And it was Justin Richards was lovely after all that. He said, I want you to write after he'd heard Silence of Time, he said, I want you to write a Doctor Who book. You know, I really love what you do. So, you know, and I think he had a sense that I'd been treated quite roughly at that meeting. I remember shrinking into the sofa like, oh God, this is terrible.
You knew beforehand that Gary already asked you to do it, so you were.
Oh yeah. We'd already arranged it. I mean, Gary must have told you the story of how it happened. Gary came round to the flat on one of those many occasions where he just turned up, and he said, "We're going to do Doctor Who," because we'd already been doing Bernice Summerfield, and we'd asked to do Doctor Who, and they'd said no. So we sort of knew it was, you know, in the air. But yeah, it was a couple of years later, and he said, "We're going to do Doctor Who." And I went, oh, and he went, yeah, I know you want to write it. Well, you can't, because it can only be experienced Doctor Who writers, people who've written Doctor Who books or the TV series. And I went, I know how to write audio things. And he said, you know, no. He said, directing, yes, you know, sound and stuff, music, yeah, all that. And I think he said he wanted me to direct them all at that point. And I said, well, don't you want to have a go? And he went, no, I don't want to do that. And then he went home, and I already had come up with what was essentially the idea for the Silence of Time. Then Gary phoned me. And I don't know what had happened. I don't remember the details. Maybe he told you. Maybe you can tell me what he said. But he had a conversation or had a thought, and he said, "Look, actually, I think you can write it. Maybe write the first one," because he'd realised that if he got anyone else to do it, the secret would leak out. And he thought, well, I'm part of the sort of inner circle. Get Nick to do it if he's so keen to do it. I said, well, I've already come up with an idea. He said, yeah, I knew you would have done. It was only 5 minutes ago.